So good morning to you, and good afternoon. Here it is in Malmo, Sweden. It's a pleasure for me to be able to be part of this symposium that you're having today, and I'm really pleased. It's all about the digital world, and with more and more with COVID-19, we realize how important the digital world is going to be now, not just now, but into the future. But I will talk to you now today on the other global crisis, not that of COVID, but climate change and the maritime sector. With the world's attention, which is today firmly fixed on COVID-19 and the pandemic, and with no immediate end in sight, it is very easy for us to forget that COVID-19 is not the only global crisis that has challenged us all. And it's a challenge for us to rethink the way we live and the way we govern ourselves and our industries. The global crisis that I want to talk about today is climate change. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change recently concluded that global GHG emissions must be cut in half in the next decade in order for humanity to meet the collective goal of keeping temperature increases within 1.5 degrees of the pre-industrial levels. That's a huge challenge for all, for the entire world. This goal of 1.5 degrees was first set in the Paris Agreement in 2015, and the implications of not meeting this goal will be later detailed in the IPCC's 1.5 report. It was detailed in October of 2018. In short, the consequences of missing this 1.5 degree target would be dire. It would have severe economic, social, and environmental consequences. The more we exceed the 1.5 degree target, the more severe and increasingly unimaginable the consequences will be. Not surprisingly, the IPCC's 1.5 report has resulted in an increased recognition that climate change represents a global crisis, demanding all hands on deck, an approach that is required in order to address, to borrow a phrase from the shipping sector, all hands on deck. In parallel with these global developments on climate change, the IMO has been working, that's our mother institution, WMU, the World Maritime University, belongs to the IMO, our mother institution. It has been working very hard to develop a strategy for the decarbonization of international shipping. The IMO's efforts have been hampered, unfortunately, by a combination of what I have identified as two key challenges. The first is the reluctance by some of the IMO's member states to support the decarbonization of international shipping. And the second is the unwillingness, again, by some member states to recognize that the speedy and effective decarbonization, while technically and economically possible, it will impact some countries much more than others. And it will lead to the legitimate concerns by some, particularly the least developed countries, our countries, that they will be left to pay a disproportionate share of the economic cost of decarbonization and the efforts required. In these, what we all can all say are challenging times, the IMO in April of 2018 was able to agree at least on an initial strategy to reduce greenhouse gas emissions from international shipping. It represents the IMO's initial contribution to the global response that is set out in the Paris Agreement to respond to climate change by seeking to maintain a global average temperature, an increase of at least 1.5, or at the lowest 1.5 degrees. It seeks to tackle greenhouse gas emissions of the international shipping industry, which, if we compare to Germany's, it's currently the world's 6th largest emitter. Emissions from international shipping today represent over 2% of global emissions, but would increase drastically if the industry continued to operate on a business as usual scenario while other sectors decarbonize. Shipping has to play its part. As a result, the IMO initial GHG strategy includes the following key elements. First, the ship's carbon intensity will decline as a result of successive phases of the Energy Efficiency Design Index. I hope you can see my PowerPoint here. Put the first, I don't know, how can I do this? How can I get the thing to move? But okay, I'll leave it.
Dr. Henry, we can advance it. I think you're maybe at slide 8 or so.
Okay.
Okay.
So the first of the key elements that I wish to refer to is the ship's carbon intensity that will decline as a result of successive phases of the Energy Efficiency Design Index, and the improvements that are applicable to new ships as they are set out in Annex 6 of the IMO's International Convention for the Prevention of Pollution from Ships. The second key element is the industry's average carbon intensity, and this is to decline by a minimum of 40% by 2030, while pursuing efforts towards 70% by 2050. The industry is struggling on these. Third, and critically, greenhouse gas emissions from international shipping are expected to peak and then to decline as soon as possible in order to reduce the total annual GHG emissions by at least 50%. And to do so by 2050, if we are to meet the target. And in the meantime, we've got to pursue efforts to phase them out consistently with the goals set by the Paris Agreement. The initial strategy is in fact a political, not a legal document, and its focus is on goals, not on the specific measures to meet them. The initial strategy covers the period 2018 to 2023, following which it is to be finalized. This is clearly recognizing that there is much unfinished business to be done. The strategy was adopted by 100 member states of the IMO at its Maritime Environmental Protection Committee meeting in 2018, the 72nd session of the MEPC. This is evidence of substantial support, 100 member states. It should, however, be borne in mind that the IMO has over 170 member states, representing 97.30% of the global shipping tonnage. In addition to the need to bring on board countries that have not yet participated actively, the cooperation of vocal reluctant states representing large markets or industry sectors will be important. And if I were to name, without necessarily targeting anyone, countries like Brazil, China, India, Panama, Saudi Arabia, and the United States still have a long way to go. The European Union and several Pacific Island states had pushed for a 70 to 100% reduction by 2050. The IPCC's 1.5 report suggests that 50% reduction by 2030 and full decarbonization by 2050 may be more in line with what is needed today if we were to take these big, huge issues forward. The OECD produced a study in early 2018 which suggests that from a technical and an economic perspective, shipping could fully decarbonize before 2050. A challenge indeed. But what OECD is saying is that this is achievable. Although 50% by 2030 is a significantly lower target, 50% by 2030, it is nonetheless the most far-reaching ambition in the strategy, even if it is only an aspirational one. The hope is that periodical reviews will both ensure that the initial targets are met and that the level of ambition increases over time. We've got to be ambitious. This generation has got to do something about this. COVID alone is a big warning. Much of the initial strategy, however, is imbued today with the best endeavors rather than with firm commitments. And short, very short on concrete measures, leaving the further adoption or the enhancement of regulatory goals to the review processes and the upgrades to the Energy Efficiency Design Index, aimed at promoting the use of more energy efficient equipment and engines. What all this means for the maritime sector, for instance in Europe, is twofold. First, it will be important for the sector to look beyond the current measures to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, along with other requirements, such as the 2020 sulfur cap, and to consider the region's role in supporting the full decarbonization of shipping. This has implications for all actors in the shipping sector, as well as for port operations, for domestic transportation, and the many industry sectors that depend on shipping in one form or the other. Second, as is the case with COVID-19 and this crisis we are currently facing, all of us together, we need, therefore, that we all play our part for the global good, that we be constructive partners coming together in the full decarbonization. To achieve that, the decarbonization of shipping, and indeed for the better of our societies and communities. My message is the following. My message to you. Get on board with the global effort to decarbonize shipping by supporting the full implementation of the IMO's initial strategy and its efforts to increase the ambition towards full decarbonization before 2050. Let's all get on board, all countries, developing and developed, and particularly the developed ones. It is very important that ships coming into our waters, and I'm thinking of the Caribbean, coming from there myself, on the shores in the Caribbean, that we comply with the GHG targets and ensure that our emissions are in compliance with the standards that have been set by the IMO. We've got to have the expertise to do that. We should have it. As small island states, we in the Caribbean have very much to benefit from the reduction of greenhouse gas emissions and the potential catastrophic impact that climate change can have on our small and vulnerable economies. I just want to thank you very much for these introductory remarks and hope that it is a kickoff to a good start and to the rest of your day.